Lost Art with Andrew Cox, retired Master Gunnery Sergeant. thelostart.podbean.com. Get some merchandise and help support the podcast in getting our veteran voices out for all to hear. Now on all major podcast platforms. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Be a guest, tell your veteran story, discuss your veteran business or organization. Email The Lost Art with Andrew Cox at gmail.com. Andrew Cox, a Till Valhalla Project Ambassador. See the project story at tillvalhallaproject.com. Thanks for tuning in. Please enjoy the podcast that's giving a voice to our veterans. The Lost Art with Andrew Cox.
Hello, my friends, and welcome back to the Lost Art Podcast. That podcast giving a voice to our veterans. I'm your host, Andrew Cox, and today we're going to have a My Veteran Story. But before we get into the episode, are you enjoying the podcast? Make sure you go to the website. That's thelostart.podbean.com. Go check it out. See what we got going on there. There is that merchandise tab. If you want to help support us and getting our veteran voices out for all to hear, go there and get you some cool merchandise. Get you a hat, get you a shirt, get you something, a mug. I don't know, whatever it is you want to get. But get something cool and help support us. Also want to give a shout out to the Till Valhalla Project for allowing me to be an ambassador for that great organization. If you don't know anything about them, go to their website. That's tillvalhallaproject.com. Go check them out, see what they're all about. And if there's any way you can support them, please do so. All right. We're here. I got Mark Pellon. Mark, how you doing?
I'm doing good, man. And it warms my heart to spend time with Master Guns, Andrew Cox, a guy that we shared these halls actually.
That's right.
A long time ago together.
That's right.
And then got to spend some time together at Third Mall as well. But it's awesome to see you. I'm happy. I'm excited for dinner. My wife's probably cooking. I don't know.
Oh, wow.
For tomorrow.
Yeah, I was about to say, is that tonight or tomorrow? Okay.
It's a slow roast.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I'm looking forward to it. Yeah. So let's kind of start at the beginning.
Sure.
Like, where did you grow up? What was that like? And then what kind of drew you into military service?
Yeah, so I grew up in Miami, Florida.
Mm-hmm.
I was born in New Jersey, left when I was like a year old and don't know anything about New Jersey at all. But I grew up in Miami. My family immigrated from Cuba. So I was like the first of my family born in the United States.
Okay.
And I would say this is actually hilarious. The funniest part about me ending up in the Marine Corps or the military at all is that when I was growing up, I hated school.
Yeah.
And I would get like C's were like, that was a good day. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
I've been there.
Middle school, my mom started telling me, if you don't fix these freaking grades, I'm sending you to a military academy.
Oh,
and,
wow.
I think it was ninth grade, freshman year of high school. She came home one day after a report card where I had like A, B, not an A, but I had a single B, and then everything was like C's and like a D.
Okay.
And she came home and dropped 4 pamphlets right in front of me. And she goes, go ahead and pick one. They were all military academy boarding schools.
Oh, wow.
Like uniform, the whole nine, so I cried my face off. And next day I go to school and I'm like, I'm freaking never getting another C again. I did get another C, but the D's were gone.
Yeah.
I started getting some A's.
Very
and
nice.
I find it funny, it's comical to think that the threat of military school, and I was terrified of it.
Right.
And now I have a 20, plus year career in the Marine Corps of all services. It's a little bit of a comical origin story, I would suppose. But
yeah, we all need that little kick in the butt to tell us to do our best,
And moms know best. Right?
Oh, yeah, they do.
Mama knows. But anyway, so that was kind of the beginnings, I suppose, of planting a seed of thought, of a perception of what the military was. I knew it was strict. I knew that it would require tons of discipline, that they would take none of my boyish crap that I needed to grow up, right? These concepts of manhood, maybe.
Right.
So I get into high school. I was, senior year. My grandfather, this is kind of a catalyst moment, but my grandfather passes away about 3 months before I'm graduating high school.
Oh,
I would have been the first that would have seen graduate,
Oh, wow.
because they all came from Cuba.
Yeah.
So I was the first generation, and he was kind of a father figure to me. I had a stepfather that I grew up with, but my mom and him divorced about 5 years before I graduated high school, I think. So my grandfather was the guy in the home,
right.
Sort of my example. He passes from cancer, and I kind of feel lost. I'm like, I don't know what the next thing is for me. And I'm about to graduate high school. This is such a huge milestone in every young person's life in the US and in the world, I would guess. But I start really questioning, like, what is the next thing I'm going to be doing in life? At that point in time, the push was, if you don't go to college, you're going to be a bum, right? Like that was society's push. College is the only answer if you want a decent job.
Right.
So like all high school kids, I start putting in all the applications, months in advance, and I'm waiting on responses. Grandpa passes away. I get some responses back, and I got some scholarships for music.
Okay.
And then some scholarships for sports. And so I'm like, well, gonna have to pick one, like that's basically where we're at now. So out of nowhere, a Marine band, it was actually a saxophone quartet or quintet, I can't recall, from Paris Island.
Oh, no.
They were on tour, the whole band was, and they were sending the band out in augments to cover area.
Right.
And so out of nowhere, a sax quintet like walks into my band room. And my teacher, I guess, had been contacted, but he didn't tell the students. So they walk in, and to kind of give a little context to the viewers at home.
Go ahead.
Not to toot my horn, pun intended, but I was kind of like the band king. I was like lead saxophonist and drum major for the marching band, all that stuff.
Right.
When they walked in, we were literally sitting with our instruments in hand,
Right.
And all of my fellow classmates like immediately looked at me, not because they were like, look, you could do this, but because they were like, you thought you were good, these guys are. And they hadn't even played a note, but the uniform. And so I got like offended. I was arrogant as hell. And I was like, y'all think I can't do this? Like I could do this, But I didn't know at that point in my life that was even an option, a career possibility. So I go home after that performance. I was impressed by them. They were very good. And I said, man, like maybe I should look into that, And I started thinking about what I felt I needed in life. And it wasn't 13th grade. It wasn't more classwork. It was manhood.
Right.
And I didn't know what that looked like. I didn't have my dad growing up, and I had an idea of what a man was. And I felt a man was strong. I felt a man was able to overcome adversities. I felt a man was somebody who could protect the people they love, provide for them. And I was like, sure as hell, I ain't going to do that at Florida State University or wherever I was, going to go to. Gold Knolls, by the way. But the more and more I thought about it, the more I was like, man, Marines, these guys are like the few, the proud,
Right.
And then when you think of Marines, nowadays we have far more female Marines in the Corps, and that's not a bad thing at all. But in the old times, every commercial was a guy climbing a mountain, slaying a dragon.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and then you think of drill instructors, and I'm like, those are men, and I'm scared of them,
Yeah.
I'm like, I want to be like that. And this was just, post 9/11. So I'm like, man, we're in Iraq right now. I joined the Marines. So all these thoughts flooded.
Right.
And I said, I think I'm going to try out for the band and see what happens. And then I'll consider it. So I go to my band director. I'm like, hey, I think I'm going to try out for the Marine music program. And he happened to have two sons, one in the Air Force Premier Band.
Oh, wow.
In DC, and the other one in the President's Own.
Oh, no kidding.
So he looks at me, he goes, well, listen, I think that's great. Both my sons are military musicians. You should definitely go after it. I think you got what it takes, but you should go for the Air Force because they have a better music program.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, sounds good. So I called the Air Force.
Yeah.
And I'm like, hey, I'm interested in auditioning. Long story short, they schedule an audition. I show up. Nobody's there. And
really?
I'm like, what the heck? So I call the guy. And he's like, oh, I'm so sorry. By the way, for any Air Force veterans, my cousin is a 22-year Air Force retired veteran. Love you guys. This is just my personal story. So, this happened. And I'm not trying to discredit any of my brothers or sisters in the other services. So he's, oh, I'm sorry. I schedule a second one. He's like, let's make it happen. I promise you. Second one, I show up. Nobody's there.
Oh my gosh.
He ghosted me twice. I called him. I said, hey man, like I skipped practice I was on the football team and volleyball team, and I had volleyball championship coming up, and I skipped practice because my coach gave me permission not an easy ask at that time, you know. And like, you're not even here. Like, what the heck? And he's like, I'm so sorry. I got caught up at MEPS and this. And I was like, listen, thanks for your time. And I, you know, the stations are all like right next to each other.
Right.
So you have Navy and Air Force, Army, Marines. And I literally just looked down the row. It was summertime, almost summertime in Miami. So it was like 98 degrees.
Yeah.
And I just said, I'm just walking. I walk into the Marine Corps.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, hey, I'm interested in the band and trying out. What can you guys offer me? And my recruiter, his name was Staff Sergeant Albert Marizani. I'll never forget him. Italian guy, tanker who was part of the 1st Battalion tanks who went into Iraq after 9/11.
Yeah.
War hero, great guy. And he looks at me, he goes, offer you? What makes you think that we need you? Or that you're even good enough to be in the Marine Corps?
Yeah.
And I was like, you know, just immediately caught off guard, right?
I love it.
So I'm caught off guard, and I'm like, I thought recruiters were supposed to be hungry for contracts, and this guy did not care. He was like, first of all, let's sit down. Let me ask you some questions about who you are and see if you have what it takes to even be considered, you know? I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, let's sit down. So we do a whole interview. Now that I, you know, I'll mention my recruiting background later, but now that I have been to recruiter school, I also understand that in some ways he understood what he was dealing with, and he was astute. But it was what I needed to hear.
Right.
And so we did an interview, blah, blah, blah. And finally he's like, well, look, I think you have a lot of the qualities that we are looking for. You know, you're athletic, you're in sports, you clearly have an affinity for music. I took East in the back on the computer and did fine. So he's like, let's call the musician technical assistant who does all the auditions and set it up. So Mitch Martin, Mass Sergeant retired, was my MTA.
Okay.
And if he sees this, he'll die laughing, because he told me 6 years later when I met him for the first time, don't you ever tell anyone this story until I retire. So he's
retired. It's okay.
He's been long retired.
Yeah.
But we do my audition over a phone. On speaker.
Oh, nice.
And I was told this was like my initial, that if I did well, he would come to South Florida and we would do a formal audition. So I'm like, oh, okay, cool. I played for about a minute, the Paul Creston Sonata for saxophone.
Okay.
And while I'm playing, he starts shouting, stop, stop, stop. Well, he kicks me out of the room. He's like, is your recruiter in there? I said, yes. He goes, good, you get out. So I get out of the room. My recruiter comes out after like 5 minutes. I'm nervous. I don't know what's going on. And my recruiter looks at me. He's like, I thought you told me you were a good player. Dead serious face. Wow. And I'm like, sir, I mean, I'm literally one of the best. I made tri-state, which is like all state, but you take Alabama, Georgia, and Florida. Right. I made tri-state. And I'm like, I figured I was one of the better ones in the 3-state area. So I'm all sad and depressed. And he goes, I'm just effing with you, man. He wants to hire you right away. And he wants to offer you a guaranteed duty station.
Oh, wow.
And like my jaw dropped. I did not expect this. I was actually only trying out because I figured I need to get ready for college auditioning. So this would be a good way to build that experience. Now it's real. Now I either shit or get off the pot, as they say. Sorry for my language. And bottom line is, he looks at me and says, he's offering you the job, but if somebody else in the entire East, or I think he said Southeast, takes it, which he was correct on that, that could happen whenever. I'm not forcing you to do anything, but it's yours or not. And I go, I just need some time to think about it, because I didn't come in here thinking this was going to happen. I go home, couldn't sleep all night. Next day, I'm like, I think I'm going to do this. You know, like it kind of set in.
Right.
It was a slow, I'm going to do this. I'm going to go become a Marine and do music. And the next day I go to my mom and I tell her, I think I'm going to join the Marines and be a musician. And she looks at me and goes, get the hell out of my house. Kicked me out of the house. She would laugh if she saw this too. Mainly she would laugh because she's the proudest mom on earth. She buys like every Marine Corps thing that ever existed. But in that moment, you know, her father just died. Her son's about to die. That's what she's thinking. You know, how could you do this? especially after I threatened you with military school.
And
now you're leaving to go off to the Marines of all the freaking branches, right? And we're in the middle of a war. So, so she kicks me out. I go stay at a friend's house, and I'm just like, what the hell to do? Like, this is kind of weird. I don't have a house. I go back to the Staff Sergeant Marzani, and I'm like, all right, I want to do this. I'm 18 at the time. I graduate in like 2 months, and then, I'm ready to go. And he goes, all right, well, we're going to sign papers on Thursday or something, I think it was. So on Tuesday of that same week, I call my mom and I'm like, look, on Thursday, I'm going into the office and I'm planning to sign these papers. And I'll admit this out loud. I stole this line straight up from a super wise guy that I can't even remember his name or where I met him. But he told me, tell your mom this, and I bet you she'll buy it. He said, I'm going to go in there and either make the worst decision of my life without you or make the best decision of my life with you. And if you think about that, that best decision could be not doing it. Or it could be doing it, but with you. It's guiding me, And I'm 18, but you're still my mother, and I still respect you. I said that to her. I told her the time. She goes, I don't care. And she hangs up. And I figured she's not showing up. Now, context for the viewers, my mom was the head of sales for the Miami Herald, which is like New York Times of Miami. And she was in sales for 18, 20 years and the head of the department. So she's very savvy, street smart, self-made woman from Cuba, came here when she's 13 and just built herself into a very, accomplished businesswoman.
Right.
So she's not getting sold on nothing. And she shows up to the office on Thursday. She walks in. I'm actually going to demonstrate this. I'm going to do it because we're on film, right? So my mom sits down. You're the staff sergeant. She sits down wearing a dress and heels. And she goes, don't F with me. I want to see it in writing or he doesn't sign anything. Just puts her feet on his desk just like that.
Very nice.
And Staff Sergeant Marzani says, not a problem, ma'am. But before we get going, get your feet off my desk or walk out of the office. Just like that, dude. And when this happens, me at 18, I went, oh, Lord, and I just walk out. So I walk out of the office and I sit down on the sidewalk outside of the RSS. And I'm on the sidewalk melting in summer of 2004 because awesome. I'm like, these two are about to go to war. So she sits in there. I fall asleep outside. They were in there that long. I don't know exact time frame, but I would guess it was quite a bit. She comes out, kicks me to wake me up. I'm like, oh, what? She goes, I looked at the papers and I don't, if you want to, that's fine. And she just leaves, And I'm like, frick, I'm like sweating, I'm dehydrated. I walk in, I sign all my papers. I end up shipping out to boot camp in October of 2004. October 10th or something like that. I started boot camp October 11th, official, entry pay date or whatever that's called. And and the rest is history, as they say. So that's the how I got into the Corps and the background to it.
That's a good one. I like that. That's a good story. So talk to me about when you go to boot camp, really no experience with the military, right? You already, you have a vision of what the drill instructor is, what the Marine Corps is. Talk to me a little bit about your experience at boot camp.
I'll never forget one particular moment, which was on the first night that you go to your squad bay. You're a former drill instructor. So, you go through receiving for, 72 hours or something. I can't remember. And then you meet your drill instructors.
Black Friday.
Sit up straight, look at me right now, right? And then that first night in your platoon squad bay.
Right.
I'll never forget that night. I was laying there, everything is, okay, freaking, you're sitting in your rack. They're like, ready, boom, and you lay down, like an instant lay down. And I'm literally sleeping at attention. My hands are to my side, freaking thumbs across where my seams would be, like I'm wearing shorts.
Right.
And they, lights, boom. And it's dead silent. And I'll never forget listening in that room to myself and others. like you could hear, adults and grown men, and everybody's laying there for night number one, and you just hear snot and like subtle tears all around, including me. I was like, what the hell have I done? Funny story, recently my wife found a big stack of my boot camp letters home.
Oh, wow. Nice.
I haven't seen them in 20 years.
Yeah.
I guess my mom had it in a box, and then my mom sent this box to my wife just for, to keep or whatever. And then my wife was digging through it and found them. My first letters, I am embarrassed to say this out loud. My first letters home were all basically to my wife and my girlfriend, or my mom and my girlfriend.
Yeah.
And all of my letters to my mom were signed, "Love, your baby boy."
Oh,
swear on my life, I was that traumatized that I was like in the fetal, in my brain and soul. I was back in a womb, like just help me. But no, boot camp was unquestionably like the beginning of a lifetime of a journey, so to speak, of realizing that, number one, you can do much more than you think you can do.
Right.
Whenever you're in the worst moment ever, it's only the worst moment at that point. Life has a funny way of, you think this is the worst it'll ever get. And then later on in life, you could laugh at that moment.
Right.
Because this new moment is so much more significant.
That's true.
But boot camp was everything that I was needing, and it gave me everything I craved for, and I didn't have a way out except through it.
Right.
Like that's just the reality. I mean, I guess some people try to get out of it, but they learn the hard way that
it's much easier to just go through it.
You might want to finish this, or you're going to be here for 9 or 10 months instead of 3, right? So I got there underweight. I had a waiver for I was 6'2", but I only weighed 140 pounds, and I needed to weigh 145.
Yeah.
And so I was underweight, and I was told early in boot camp I would be put on something called double rations, double rats, and I wasn't. And so I was like eating like a freaking horse, but not double rations, and I didn't know it. So fast forward to, you go through boot camp. It's definitely a life-changing experience because you realize that whatever you think you can't do, if you're forced enough, you're going to do it.
That's right.
And then the question is, are you going to do it with the right spirit? Because frankly, I think most of my life I've considered myself a quitter. Like when push comes to shove, when you're right at that moment, when it's easy where you can just back out.
Yeah.
I find that through my life, I have decided, it's kind of the nature, my nature.
Right.
Some people have a different nature. I have come across some amazing people who their nature is when they get to that line, something clicks in them and they like shove through that moment. I have always had the opposite. And I think a lot of people who know me well would be surprised. But one of the things Marines talk about is know yourself, seek self-improvement. And like, I think that if you are honest enough to say, what is my weaknesses?
Right.
Then you have a chance at
that's true.
improving it. So boot camp gave me what I needed, because as a quitter by nature, I didn't have an option to quit.
Yeah.
And then that reformed me, that steel hardening process where you get in the flames and all the impurities are gone because you have no choice. And when I graduated boot camp, I had the highest of Superman syndromes. Like I was bulletproof.
Yeah.
In here. Reality was the complete opposite. But I was bulletproof in my mind, and I acted like it. Yeah. That's where the arrogance came. But it was a different kind of arrogance. Prior to boot camp, my arrogance was just foolish childness, which I guess it was that too as a Marine. But it was also because now I had been tested. I had gone through a rite of passage that few will ever understand. And I knew that. So I had an arrogance based on evidence.
Yeah.
And what I needed was confidence, not arrogance. But I had evidence of something that I was worthy to be called a man, and more importantly, a Marine.
Right.
And so, that's what boot camp experience was for me. I'll never forget my drill instructors, as most Marines would never forget their drill instructors. Right. I'll never forget some of the experiences. I pissed myself on the rappel tower, not
Nice.
because of fear.
Because you had to go.
I had to go so bad, and it was in the middle of cold winter. And, you wear these big gloves so that you can repair. And I couldn't get the freaking harness off because I couldn't feel my fingers.
Oh, wow.
And I was running around, hey, help me take this harness off. And everybody's like, get the frick away from me, man. I'm not touching that, And I couldn't hold it. And I literally pissed myself. And I was like, frick. Walked up to the top of the rappel tower and rappelled with urine down my pants. And, like those things are funny as hell. Yeah. But they do something to you in the moment. Yeah. Because you realize all of our thoughts about comfort. Mm-hmm. What is comfort, man? Like, do you really need it? Yeah, very true. One of the drill instructors were like, "Are you freaking kidding me? Like you pissed yourself, and this recruit had to piss her." Like I wasn't afraid of the rappel tower. I was nervous. It was the first time I'd done it, but it wasn't. I was literally on the ground level and running around asking anyone to take this harness off because I couldn't feel my finger. Yeah. And finally, I pissed myself. It was a little warm. I went to the top, and let's go bungee jump, right? Yeah. So, just a life-changing experience. It teaches you, it gives you a foundation to what I think. I was talking to the Brigadier General at the ball the other night, and I said, we get told honor, courage, commitment right out the gate. They hand you the freaking postcard. Mm-hmm. You don't really understand the depth of what those words mean until you have experiences and you meet heroes and you talk to these people who have lived it. Right. You don't understand it yet. Mm-hmm. So as a young Marine, you can shout those words, but then you have to bleed, cry, suffer, sacrifice, mourn before you know what honor, courage, commitment means. And so I think boot camp is basically the starting point to getting an understanding of this is what honor, courage, commitment means. Your recruiter told you about it, but now you had to earn something. Right. Yeah. And now you get to hear about these legends, Smedley Butlers, John Bassalones, Hathcock, you start to really get the foundation for, now you get a little taste of honor, courage, commitment. Now go be a Marine and really figure this out, so that's what boot camp was for me. Very nice. I like that. And then, so after boot camp, you went to MCT, and that was because you were East Coast, right? Yeah. So I was here at Geiger, I think it is, right? Yeah. Yeah. At, right next door. Yeah. And how was that? Was that a good experience? That was miserable. Honestly, the weather was horrific the whole time. It was in January. Yeah, a little chilly. Super cold. Yeah. And somehow also rained the whole time. So, you do your final FEX, field exercise, and you got to be in fighting holes and this and that. I'm literally in a fighting hole. It's like 36 degrees, and I'm at my knees with water. Yeah. And I'm just like, this is the worst. Not to mention there was no body fat on you at all because you were 140 pounds. Well, I forgot to fill that in. When I left boot camp, I was 170 pounds. Whoa. I went from 140 to 170 in 3 months. That's impressive. And when my family saw me, all right, this is hilarious, and people get a chuckle out of this. So we leave Paris Island immediately, right? Because you don't want to be there another second. Right. So you drive out the causeway. My family was staying at a cheap hotel just outside of the base, essentially. Yeah. So they take me there because I'm in alphas or blues, I can't remember. But I'm getting out of uniform. Yeah. I want to get changed into normal clothes for the first time in 3 months. Yeah. And I had 3rd Battalion sweat top, sweat bottom. And of course, you're not supposed to do that, but I was like walking around proud as hell. And we were I'll never forget it. We were on the 2nd floor of this multi-story hotel or whatever. Yeah. So I'm with my grandmother, and my girlfriend and my mom, and my little sister, who was like 10 at the time. Okay. And we go back to the car to leave, and my grandmother's like, "Oh, I forgot something." I guess it was like a small purse or something, like what do they call those? A clutch. Yeah, she forgot her clutch. And I'm like, "I'll get it." And I'm not making this up. If I did this today, straight to medical. I literally ran up the side of a pillar, grabbed the floor of the 2nd level, did a pull-up, came up over the ledge, went into the room, got the thing, and came down the same way, didn't take the stairs. Oh, that's funny. My family's standing out there, And they're like, what the hell is wrong with him, you know? And it all started in the room when I was changing. And the room got silent.
Yeah.
And Cuban people are not silent.
Yeah.
They're loud as hell. And the room was dead silent. And I turn around and I realize everyone's staring at me.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what is wrong with everybody? And they looked at me and said, what did they do to you? And I didn't understand the question. I'm like, what do you mean, what did they do to me? They saw that I was once 140 pounds and now I'm 170. I look like a bodybuilder to them.
Yeah.
And I didn't understand it until I stepped on a scale at the restaurant that we went to directly after. So it's funny to me now, but my family was like in total disbelief. They're like, these people injected him with steroids.
Yeah.
That's the only logic that could have been. So, yeah.
Wow. That's funny.
Yeah.
So, well, okay. So 170 pounds.
I left a little
beefier.
About 30 pounds ago. That's
Yeah. So, but you're at MCT, freezing to death the whole time, raining. You know, I mean, I'm assuming you got to do all the fun stuff.
Yeah.
Weapons,
and that part was awesome. Yeah, I love the heavy machine guns and freaking grenade launcher.
Oh, yeah.
And watching it just, all of that was great. Throwing a grenade was exciting, you know, because I was like holding it like, I'm never letting this thing go until I'm letting this thing go. I was not the recruit you had to worry about. I played baseball, so I'm like, this is going where I want it to go.
Yeah.
But I was holding it and I was like nervous as hell. I'm like, there's two hands. I'm like, don't let this thing go. Hey, this is gonna go, right? The instructor could tell, like, all right, this kid's gonna throw this. And they tell you like throw it like, 20 feet or whatever.
Yeah.
I launched that thing. I was like, how far of a berm is that? I'm over the berm is where we're going with that thing. So
as far away from me as possible.
The hell yeah. But that was exciting, So yeah, MCT was cool. It was miserable in the weather aspect, but it was interesting too because the dynamic from boot camp to MCT changes so dramatic.
Yeah.
You go from freaking don't think to what do I do with my free time right now? Like in terms of movement to a location. Maybe I'm marching the platoon today, like it becomes a little bit of a segue into the core. Right. And I also find that it's interesting because I don't know that there's a perfect way to do it without young Marines becoming nasty, as a drill instructor would say. You know what I mean? Like we leave boot camp pristine.
Right. Yeah.
And then you get to MCT and we expose young Marines to young Marines. And that's where they start to get leadership from internally.
Right.
And I almost wonder, like, do we need NCOs from the fleet to be a part of the platoons in MCT to kind of help manage that thing before MOS school? Because even MOS schools are like, what the hell happened to you between boot camp and now?
Yeah.
It's MCT, right? So I don't know if the Marine Corps has a good option for that just yet.
I think they have fixed a lot of that.
I would assume.
In what they are doing from boot camp. They have, 2 weeks now
in boot camp.
Of where that transition time for them to start walking and talking and doing things as a Marine versus the recruit.
People by rank.
Yeah.
I think the biggest issue though is when you're in the squad base, it's like young Marine and young Marine. It's not.
No, yeah, you're right.
So now you've got, we talk about sustaining the transformation, which just the new one was just released actually, and I just downloaded it and I'm starting to read it now. But you get that one young Marine who didn't really buy in at boot camp, which is shocking that it happens, but it happens. And then they're like also influential. And then you start to see that, people start to act like they're back on the block as a DI, I would say. And then it becomes a sort of a virus, in my opinion. So
it does. Yeah.
I don't know that we can fully stop that. And that's where the leadership of the fleet and schools have to really, grab a hold of these people.
I agree with you. I don't think it'll ever truly stop.
You can't. There's always going to be 10%.
But I think we as a organization sometimes forget that sustaining the transformation has to continue. It's not just boot camp, MCT, to the schoolhouse, and then out to, once you get to the fleet, it still has to continue.
Right.
So those conversations have to happen, right? Reminder of, hey, don't forget honor, courage, commitment. Don't forget your leadership traits, your leadership principles, general orders, your, all those types of things.
Right.
Because we start to revert back to what we were before we came in. And if you're not consciously making an effort to change and continue to change, then yeah, you're going to revert back.
Yep, no doubt.
So okay, so you did do MCT, and then you did go to the school.
Yes.
Okay, so talk to me about getting to the School of Music.
And I almost didn't make it out.
Really?
Oh man! So incoming auditions, right? They give you an initial session of assessment. Excuse me, of where are you after all this training?
Right. Yeah,
and at the time, we had the old 4.0 scale of assessments in the music field. And in order to start training, you had to have at least a 2.1, I think, or a 2.2, something like that.
Okay.
I'm not sure if that's correct, but it was in the twos.
Yeah.
And graduation was 2.7.
Yeah.
I do my initial assessment. It was with a guy named Mark Stout, MU1 at the time. Okay. I'm not sure if he retired as a chief. I'm sure he did. He was a great sailor and saxophone. I got a 1.4 something.
Whoa.
I was so far from trainable.
Yeah.
That I was supposed to be kicked out.
Yeah.
So I get called up, and in fact, I've recently reconnected with him. He lives here in Jacksonville, Alex Gray.
Oh, yeah.
He was the commanding officer for the Marine Detachment.
Right.
So I get called into his office, and he's like, well, big, deep voice, what do you want to do in the Corps? Because music is not going to be it. And I'm standing there and I'm like, this is my first week at my MOS, right? Gunny Mummy.
Gunny Mummy, yeah.
So he's standing there, big old glasses. I'll never forget his face, man. And I said, sir, may I speak? And he goes, sure, be careful. And I go, with respect, sir, the instructor doesn't know what the hell they're doing. And I'll go grab my saxophone right now, and I will play by memory, because this is ridiculous. Just like that. Gunny Mummy, literally, he's standing there, and he's like, and Alex Gray is like, calm down, Gunny, sir, calm down. I even lost parade rest. I was like, sir, this is bull crap. I lost.
Yeah.
And he goes, you're either extremely foolish or you really believe what you're saying. So I'm going to give you another week, and you're going to redo your assessment. And if you are not at least at the 2 point whatever that you need, we're going to find you a new job. And I said, good to go, sir. A week later, I take a reassessment with two instructors this time, because they were covering their butts. You know what I mean? But it was neither of them were the first.
Right.
So it was an Army instructor and a Marine.
Okay.
Not a sailor. I end up getting a 2.9.
Wow.
Which, for those at home, a 2.7 was graduating requirement.
Yeah.
A 3.0 is to the level of a staff NCO.
Yeah.
And I was a PFC, and I scored to the rank of sergeant, essentially, right? So I get called back to see Chief Warrant Officer Gray.
Yeah.
And he's like, how do you explain this? And I'm like, sir, I told you, the instructor didn't know what the hell they were doing. And clearly these two do. So he ends up launching an inquiry, a preliminary inquiry on the Navy instructor.
Yeah.
Because he's like, I think this guy's trying to mess with our Marines. So even funnier than everything I just said, I leave from the School of Music. I graduate with a 3.1 or something like that.
Yeah.
And I leave to Hawaii as my first duty station.
Mm-hmm.
I do a full tour in Hawaii. Best tour. I mean, you can't ask for a better tour as a first-term Marine.
Yeah.
I traveled the world. I was put front and center on every ensemble. I was singing. I was doing everything,
Right.
And I get ready to finish that time in Hawaii.
Mm-hmm.
And I find out that one of the staff sergeants who was scheduled to go back to the school for the unit leaders course failed a PFT, unfortunately. And there was an opening potentially. They weren't going to send this Marine to the UL.
Right.
Because you had to have a passing score on your PFT to go.
Right.
So I walk into Mark Gleason's office, Master Guns at the time. And I'm like, Master Guns, please, I've been begging to go to this course. I know I'm only a sergeant, but I know I would do well, blah, 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 blah. And he's like, he's annoyed with me because I literally bothered him for 4 years.
Yeah.
And he's like, hold on a second. He picks up the phone. He calls. I don't remember. Might have been Will Canteras at I don't even. What was it called?
No.
CDFM is now, but we used to call it MPO 20 back then, which is like 2 iterations ago. And he calls. He says, "Hey, I got a sergeant. He's very good on the instrument. Not going to have a problem graduating. Blah blah blah. But please get him out of my hair. He's due to rotate in like the next 5 months. So my time on station was good to go."
Yeah.
And on speakerphone, he says, "Oh yeah, we have 2 openings. Send him if he's willing, but the course is in 3 weeks."
Oh wow.
So Gleason basically says, if you want to go, your household goods, like nothing's going to get there with you. I said, I don't care. I want it. So I check into the ULC. I meet my classmates. Guess who is in my class for this ULC course?
Is it the saxophone instructor, Navy?
Mark Stout, the Navy instructor who gave me the score. So I walk up to him. I'm a sergeant. So he hasn't seen me in 4 years. And I'm like, "Hey, man, how you doing? I'm Mark Pellon. Nice to meet you." "Hey, Mark Stout. Nice to meet you." I'm like, "Hey, let me ask you a question. Were you an instructor here?" I already know the answer.
Yeah.
"Were you an instructor?" He's like, yeah, I just finished my time as a teacher. And now, I wanted to get this knocked out so that I could go to the next tour. It's like, "Oh, cool. Yeah. Out of curiosity, what's the lowest score you've ever given anybody?" And he's like, "Oh, man, I don't know. There's some bad ones, like a 1 point something I think I've given before." It's like, yeah, that was me. And he looks at me. He's like, "No, I would have remembered. It's not you for sure. This kid was terrible." I was like, "Yeah, Mark, it was me. I was the 1.4 something you gave." He's like, "No, how? You're like, how are you here now at the unit leaders course? There's no way. That was only a few years ago." I was like, "Well, were you investigated after that?" He's like, yeah. They thought I was like changing the numbers and messing with Marines, and I was like defending myself. Like, yeah, it was me, man. I scored a 2.9 a week after that audition, and here I am. We became great friends.
No kidding.
It was an awesome time. He was struggling with conducting, so I would help him with conducting.
Yeah.
I was struggling with music theory,
Mm-hmm.
and he would help me with music theory, and we became good friends the whole course.
Yeah.
But it was one of the funniest experiences because, it's almost impossible for that to happen, especially, you don't see, back then you didn't see a lot of first term Marines going back to the UL. And that was just by the grace of God. So,
I got a funny connection there. Mark Gleason, my first band was 29 Palms, and he was the drum major. And my wife wanted to finish her degree, but it would have taken too long if we stayed in California. So she wanted to go back to Oklahoma. So I went to him and I said, "Look, I want to do a 1-year tour and go to Okinawa. But after that, I want to go to the schoolhouse to do the ceremony conductor drum major course."
Yeah.
And he was like, "Okay, let me make a phone call." So he calls up and they're like, "Oh yeah, we can get him to Okinawa, no problem." He said, "Yeah, but he wants to go to the schoolhouse after." And they were like, "Oh yeah, absolutely. We'll send him to the schoolhouse." So I show up in Okinawa. Then Gleason got orders to Okinawa. So he shows up, right? And so he's, again, the drum major. I think he became, at that point, they were turned over to band managers. But he shows up, and it was time for me to rotate, and they were not giving me orders to the schoolhouse. And so I go to Gleason, and I'm like, this is something we talked about. Yeah. And he's like, "Give me a minute." Yeah. So he makes the phone call and basically yells at somebody over the phone. And he's like, "You're giving him orders to the schoolhouse and he's going to show up there. Like, you better make the orders match what's going to happen," type of thing. I don't know what the exact conversation was, but whatever he said and whatever he did, it worked because I got orders to the school. And I was a first term Marine going to the schoolhouse, or just re-enlisted going to the schoolhouse. So.
Mark was a drill instructor at heart, but he was also, he was good with people. And he would talk to fellow leaders, which, with common sense. Yeah. And I think people appreciated that.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
He chewed my ass out once when I was in Hawaii.
Yeah.
They made me the section leader, or I should say, they made me the principal player. I was musically the best saxophone, and Mark was a saxophone player.
Yeah.
And we were understaffed at one point. We were doing a jazz concert, and Mark was playing lead tenor sax and I was playing lead alto.
Yeah.
And we were playing a song. Man, I'm blanking on it. I think it was Pennsylvania 6-5000.
Okay,
yeah. I've only ever played it that one time, but
that was one of the staples we played at 29 Palms.
Back in the day. And Mark knew it.
Yeah.
And so as lead alto, for viewers at home, you make the decisions musically for the section.
Right.
But I'm a corporal and Mark's a master guns at that time, you know?
Yeah.
So we're doing something and I said, Staff Sergeant, can I get a second for the section? He's like, yeah, go ahead. And I'm like, hey, sax is on measure, 9, beat 3. We're going to play that short, blah, blah, blah. And Mark Gleason says, hey, no, we're going to keep that long. And I kid you not, I was like, Master Guns, I'm playing the lead alto. Just like and he, you know him well.
I do, yeah.
He just
the drill instructor came
everybody out. Get the hell out of the room right now. And everybody's just like, they're out of the room like lightning. And he commences to ripping me up for like 10 solid minutes for talking back to him, right? So then he goes out, grabs everybody, come back in, let's keep going with rehearsal. So we start again. And I played it the way I said. I played it short. I'm like, I'm playing it short. I'm the lead alto. Man, this man heard me play that note short and it was over. He kicks the music stand. He gets up. Everybody's like, hey, rehearsal's done. Everybody, we're done.
Just sleep.
Yeah. Will Batista. It was either Will Batista or Ken Douglas was the small ensemble leader at the time. Man, it was good. That was my first year in Hawaii. And again, that arrogance, that lack of humility and common sense, really. I mean, just stupid young Marine stuff. But Mark knew that I had talent and it's better to have to always pull them back than to shove them forward. And so he could see it and he grew me quite a bit. I mean, he made a lot of, he said, hey, stupid, like you got talent, right? This later after the showings, you got talent. Start using some brain cells, right? And then over the years, he really,
I've definitely had my fair share of bastions.
Sure. But
good guy. Okay, so you go back. You went to Hawaii first duty station. You're back at the schoolhouse for the
ULC.
Because it was fairly new at that point, right?
I think it had been around for probably about 5 or 8 years. The UL at that point, because what was it? Late 90s.
It was 2000.
Yeah. So. I would have been.
I think I was the last CCD.
Yeah, so I was 08.
Okay, so it's been a while. Okay,
so about 6 years or something like that.
Okay.
From there, I came here.
Okay,
which is
second Mark.
You and I.
Yeah.
Worst tour of maybe my career, on a personal level, on a physical level, and on a professional level.
Yeah.
I came here on fire. I was like, I'm going to be chesty puller in the music field.
Right.
And, graduating the ULC, I'm coming here with all these new skills, ducting, and I want to be a director and this and stuff. And I walk in the door and it was a catastrophe. And I'm going to do my best to not slander, but the leadership just wasn't in a good place.
Wasn't gelling.
It wasn't in a good place.
Yeah.
My officer in charge at the time was going through some really, really hard stuff in his personal life, with his family, daughter in particular, if I remember correctly. But he was a great man. I could see how much it was just killing him. This was before you ever got here. Then he changed over, retired, I think, if I remember correctly, or he went to he might have gone to Cherry Point actually. And then we got a new band officer who was like bad, but for other reasons, not because they were going through personal problems, but because they were just, in my opinion, and I say this with a little hesitance, because when you're a young troop, you don't see the full picture.
Yeah.
But to me, incompetence, at least from the perspective that I had at the time. So there was that. The bandmaster in the early parts of my tour here was not doing what I think needed to be done. We were showing up in the morning, finding out we have a commitment that we didn't even know existed. No rehearsals, sometimes double booked. on multiple. I mean, this is not like a one-off.
It happened more than once. Yeah.
I want to give a shout out to Dave Wilson. You know, he retired not too long ago. He and I butted heads so hard while we were here. He wanted so badly for things to go right. And so did I.
Yeah.
We were very different kind of people. He was very methodical.
Yeah.
And like so organized. And I was so disorganized and creative. And I had bad judgment, truly. And he used to call me a wild cowboy. And he was right. He was, it was like all the right enthusiasm, none of the freaking brains to use it the right way. That's really what it was. But I give a shout out to him because if it weren't for him, I truly don't know how this place wouldn't have just totally collapsed and the company commander would have just taken over here. Like it was so bad. 6 Marines kicked out for drug usage.
Ooh.
It was toxic stuff.
Yeah.
The worst tour of my life. About, I want to say maybe my final 8 months, we get Master Guns Matthew Boatwright, who checks in, which I got to meet his lovely wife Maggie at the ball on Saturday. I hadn't met her before, and it was so awesome to meet her and just, you know, to say hello. He shows up and he immediately does what he does as the best of the best. And he says, I see every problem and we're going to fix it now.
Yeah.
We're not going to ease into nothing.
Yeah.
I'm
it's
not gonna,
immediate.
It's now.
Yeah.
So he makes me the acting enlisted conductor instantly because he's like, I will not have incompetence. We will have excellence, period. Right. He tells the band officer, go to your office and don't come out until I tell you, basically.
Yeah.
Like I don't know that I saw the band officer after he showed up. It was Master Gun's show. And probably for the best. At one point, I was the EC and the SEL, small ensemble leader, because we were gapped.
Yeah.
And I will tell you right now, if the tour hadn't broken me already, those months really broke me.
Oh, yeah.
Because everything I did for Matthew Boatwright was wrong.
Yeah.
Everything. There wasn't a document I didn't give him that wasn't red pen to hell. There wasn't a timeline that I proposed that wasn't without the right consideration. It was like, I was in this building, in that office right over there as the EC, until 2100 sometimes.
Yeah.
Sitting there like, Lord, should I do 7:15 or 7:30? Because if I don't account for that 15 minutes of possible traffic, he's going to red pen this. Oh, Lord, what am I going to? I would have, you know, just detriment. Then to add to the professional hardships, I was going through a divorce. And then I had a medical emergency during the tour that almost had me medically retired. And if I had not fought it, I probably would have been medically retired. A spinal surgery and still don't have any feeling till this day on my whole right side of my body. And I'm grateful to the Lord that I was A, that I'm alive, and B, that I've been able to have a good career and that I'm not severely, hindered. But all of that was like the perfect storm: professional catastrophe, medical catastrophe, personal life catastrophes. I was my faith in religiously speaking was as lost. I was practicing a faith called Santeria, which comes from Cuba, but stems from Africa. It's very related to voodoo, animal sacrifices, dark magic stuff, which was my family's religion. And I was so lost in life that I was practicing that stuff. So everything at every level was broken. Yeah. Matt Boatwright shows up, puts me to the leadership grinder school 101. Yeah. I'm getting out of the Corps. I'm like, it's done. I tried to lap move to Marine Special Operations for K9. I've been doing K9 work at that time for 12 years or something like that. And they asked for me by name to be the trainer for the K9 team. Oh, wow. And the day that I submitted my package, the commandant released a white letter email to all Marines, basically saying that we had too many staff NCOs and officers in MARSOC already, and they could not accept any more lap moves into MARSOC for staff NCOs or officers. I was a staff sergeant at that time of 5 months or something like that, and I was just heartbroken. At that point, I was like, I'm just going to get out. I'll go get out, go work for a police department was what my plan was, and be a K9 officer. So anyway, Matt Boatwright calls me in about 3 weeks before my EAS to get out of the Marine Corps.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, I know why you're getting out, and I understand how hard this tour has been. But you told me that you love these Marines, and you told me that you love the Corps.
Mm-hmm.
But now you're leaving, and all of them are going to be left with possibly the same level of leadership that got you to leave,
Mm-hmm.
instead of you becoming the leader that you wanted. So I got you a school seat at the senior musicians course. It starts in a few weeks. I want an answer by tomorrow morning. And I laughed. I literally went, Master Guns, calm it down. I'm EASing in 3 weeks. You know what I mean? He's like, I don't want to hear it. Come back tomorrow. All I need is a yes or no. Don't explain your answer. Just yes or no. You know how he is.
Yeah.
Business. I don't need your justifications. Just yes or no. I go home. I'm driving. I'm like, it's freaking mine, you know? And all night, I'm like, he's right. You know, he's right.
Yeah.
I hated him. I walked in the next morning and I said, I have one question and then I'll give you an answer. And I said, even if I say yes, how the hell are we going to do a reenlistment in 3 weeks? Household goods shipments, blah, 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 you know, all the things. And he's like, that's laughable that you think I would not have already taken care of all that. The career planner already has your package. The CG,
it's ready.
CG already endorsed it. You just got to go sign it. And and Headquarters Marine Corps already knows you have a school seat. Yes or no? Just like that. And I'm
Tune in tomorrow for part 2.
To all the listeners out there, if you're struggling, need help, anything like that, don't forget the VA does have some great resources. You can always dial 988, press option 1. You can text 838-255, or you can go to veteranscrisisline.net and click on that chat icon. Any of those options are going to get you in contact with somebody that can help you out. But remember, one veteran life loss is one too many. I care about you. Mark cares about you. The whole veteran community cares about you. So please reach out for help. And if you're out there, you're not struggling, you're doing great, well, reach out to the buddies that you served with, ask them how they're doing, and if they need a helping hand, please reach out and do what you can for them. With that, one last time, thanks, man. Appreciate it. To all the listeners, stay motivated, change your socks.
Semper Fi.